Welcome back to the Meeple Marathon. Today we are going to talk about how to play Raiders of the North Sea. This is a classic worker placement game from Shem Phillips and Garphill Games. In Raiders of the North Sea, your objective is to become the most prestigious Viking, aka score the most victory points. You can see along the right side of the board here, we're getting towards the end of the victory point track. If you ever get to 49, you would just simply flip your card over, and the start is up there off camera. You score victory points essentially by building up your little Viking army and then pushing out into the lands and plundering. At first you'll be plundering harbors that you can see here, and then you'll be going to outposts and monasteries, and then eventually fortresses. But all of these incrementally get more difficult to plunder. You're going to have more crew, more provisions, and sometimes even gold in order to plunder up there. To do that, you're going to build up your crew and your little raiding party down here in the Viking village. So everything that's down here at the bottom of the board is your standard worker placement spots. So at the beginning of the game, you are going to have 2 silver to your name, a ship card, which really is just there to remind you of A, your color, and B, what scores for victory points at the end of the game. And a single worker, that's right, a single black worker, little Viking meeple, and 3 cards. You're dealt 5, you get to choose which 3 you're going to keep. Now, these aren't part of my crew yet. I haven't hired them. In order to hire them, I would need to pay this silver listed right here under that red banner. But let's talk about the standard worker placement spots here in the Viking village. When you take your turn, you're going to take your 1 worker that you have in your hand, and throughout the game it might become a gray worker or a white worker, or it may be a black worker, and you're going to place it in an empty spot. Wherever you place it, you get to take that action. So say I want some provisions, I would place my worker here in the mill. I would gain 1 provision, add that to my supply. Now I don't have any workers in my hand, so I have to end my turn with a worker in hand. I'm going to pick up one of these 3 that are sitting out there already. I cannot pick up the worker I just placed, so I cannot take the mill action again. And it has to be a worker that's out here. I can't say, oh, I want to take the longhouse action. There's no worker there. But maybe I want some more cards in hand, so I'm going to take this worker from the gatehouse and add 2 cards to my hand. Then the next person would go. They would place their worker on an empty spot. The gatehouse is now open, so they could go right back there, and then they could take the mill action if they want to. As long as you place your worker in an empty spot and pick up a worker that is not one you just placed, you are good to go. The objective of being down here in the Viking village is to build up your crew in order to go on a raiding party. So if you choose not to place your worker down here in the village, you're going to place them out here in these spots that are below the places that can be raided. And you can see that some of them require different color meeples. For example, to get to this outpost up here, we require a gray meeple at each one of these. There's 2 spots. So you could put a worker there, and you can put a worker there. That's how you get to these 2 locations. Once you placed a worker up here in these spots, they stay there. They don't get taken away at any point in time. So for example, say I want to raid one of these harbors here, I first would need 1 provision to give up, and I also need 3 crew members in order to go to the harbor. So we'll talk about how to get crew members in a second, but instead of placing a worker down here, I would place it in one of these 3 circles, and I would take one of these 3 spots and plunder that spot. I get all that stuff. So maybe I want 3 gold, or maybe I want a mixture of stuff. Either way, whatever spot I take from, I also take the meeple. So this is how you get that 1 meeple back into your hand, but this is also how you get the upgraded meeples. And start mixing them into the board, because you can see here it costs a gray or a white meeple in order to go to the armory or even to go to the longhouse. So at first, you can't even visit those locations because you haven't gone and raided and brought back someone else. And again, those stay there so that by the end of the game, all 3 of these spots are going to be filled. All 3 of these spots are going to be empty. So there'd be no point in going to that location anyways. So they're very quick turns. Remember, you're just placing a worker, picking up a worker, and taking the 2 actions associated with those. The end of the game is triggered in a couple ways. One of the actions you can take down here in the village is to pay the resources listed on these tiles here. These are offering tiles that you're paying to the chieftain, and they just grant you pure victory points, but you flip them over in front of you, so people don't always know how many victory points are on this. If this stack ever is emptied, basically everything's out here on the board or in front of people, triggers the end game. Or way up at the top, you can't see them, but the hardest things to plunder are fortresses. There's 6 of them, and if there's ever only just 1 remaining, you've triggered the end of the game. At that point, you count up all the victory points associated with, offering tiles. Maybe some workers crew members might give you victory points. Also, your armory track and your Valkyrie track are going to score you victory points. That is how you play Raiders of the North Sea. Let's take a closer look down here at the village, and I will briefly discuss what each location does. So the gatehouse is pretty simple. You will draw 2 cards from this townsfolk draw pile. That does not mean they are added to your crew. They're simply in your hand, and there's an 8-card limit in your hand. That's the gatehouse. Draw 2 cards. The town hall, let's take a closer look at one of these cards here, allows you to play your worker, aka discard them, for this action, one time only action on the right side. So I could go to the town hall and play this warmonger from my hand to take 1 provision from an opponent. This guy is no longer going to have the ability to be in my crew, but I also didn't have to pay him his silver to do that. I simply went to the town hall, used him for an action, and now he's gone. The barracks is how you get crew into your boat. When you go to the barracks, you would pay the silver listed right here on the left-hand side of your crew member, and they are then just added to your crew. You would play them down in front of you. Also, you'll notice that this symbol here matches this symbol. These are going to give you additional VP when certain criteria are met. So, for example, the warmonger here gets you an additional VP when raiding a harbor. So he's one you would want to get out early in the game because these harbors are going to quickly disappear. But he gets you a bonus when you raid that. All of them tell you when you would get that bonus. Sticking down here in the places you can go early on at the beginning of the game, the mill is the easiest way to get provisions, but depending on the color meeple that you send, you will get more provisions, and even a white meeple could get you a gold instead of 2 provisions. The silversmith is like the mill. You get some silver, which you need to hire. And you'll notice, actually, it's the reverse, that the black meeples get you 3 silver, whereas a white or gray worker only gets you 2. Last but not least is the treasury over here to the left. This simply allows you to discard a card. Just chuck it from your hand. You don't get any benefit from it, but you're going to get 2 silver, or you could discard 2 to get 1 gold. So it's a little bit of a mixture between the mill and the silversmith, but you're discarding cards, not getting any benefit from just getting them out of your hand. These last 2 spots here, the armory and the longhouse, again, can only be visited by gray or white meeples. If you go to the armory, you can pay 1 stone to increase your armor level, which is this red track here. You would simply move your banner up the track 2 spots, or pay 2 silver to move it up 1 spot. The armory track is going to get you end game VP depending on how high you get. So if you get all the way up to 7, you're going to score 4 additional points at the end of the game. But it does something even more important that we'll talk about here in just a second. But just remember, the red banners also match red banners on your crew. And it's also the same color as dice. So keep that color in mind. Last but not least is the longhouse. After you have raided some places, you might end up with some cattle tokens. You could trade a cattle in at the longhouse for 2 provisions. Otherwise, at the end of the game, your cattle are only worth a half a point. So you would actually need 2 cattle to score 1 VP. So maybe worth it to trade them in for some provisions, or you can choose to pay the cost of one of these chieftain offering tiles and gain that tile. Again, these victory points are kept in front of you as secret to try and make the game not so open as far as who is in the lead. So those are the spots all down here in the Viking village. Now, let's come up here and talk about, we already talked about how you go raiding, but I want to get past the harbor, because the harbor simply grants you 1 victory point, but it's also the easiest way to get gray meeples into the game and to get some basic resources here that you can then later spend or keep for endgame scoring. But let's look at, say, the outpost here. The outpost, first of all, requires 4 provisions. 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are going to get returned to the supply. You also have to have at least 3 crew members to go on this, and you're also going to get to roll a single red die. Some of these, like this monastery, allows you to roll 2. What you're hoping to do is score at least 8 total attack points, or 14 total strength. I believe it's called, not attack points. If you score at least 8, you're able to plunder one of these 2 outposts. If you score 14, you get those bonus extra 2 victory points. Well, how do we come up with this number? Well, that's the red. So you would, remember, you'd have to have at least 3 people to do this. So say these are the crew on my boat. I've paid my 4 provisions, and let's just say I've raised my armor level up to 4. These 2 guys would get me 6, 8, 12. So I'm already at 8. I'm guaranteed to at least be able to raid an outpost. But then I'm also going to roll this die here. And that's going to give me 3, gives me a total of 15. So I've actually surpassed 14. I would get the 4 victory points on top of plundering one of these locations and gaining that worker. So that's where armor comes into play. On top of just scoring you victory points, it's a permanent modifier to your strength on top of your crew. Now, for the most part, when you go raiding, your crews are always going to come back with you, unless one of the locations that you visit has one of these black skull tokens. It's just an outline of a skull, but these are Valkyrie tokens. This means that one of your crew members is going to perish in the raid. Now, that's not always bad. Some crew members actually give you a bonus when they perish in a raid. So you'd be okay with that. But also, there's the Valkyrie track, which is right here, this black track on the far left. And as you move up it, you can see it's giving you more victory point bonuses the higher you get. So as you send Vikings to Valhalla, you are scoring more victory points at the end of the game. And one of the favorite expansions for this game actually takes this track and adds to it even more, meaning that your Vikings who die in raids have even give you even more of a bonus. They're worth even more. So, and if at any point all of these Valkyrie tokens are ever removed from the board, then that is the third and final way to trigger the end game. And that's it. That is everything you need to know to play Raiders of the North Sea. Again, at the end of the game, you're going to add up victory points you might have from this track, total here, and then your secret offering tokens that you have face down in front of you. The person with the most victory points is the winner. If you have any questions, please feel free to let me know in the comment section below. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Have a great day.